Okay, so hello and welcome to Trending Topics. I'm James Martin, I'll be your moderator today. If you've been before, you'll know that this panel is supposed to be a wrap-up of all the key trends that have gone down here in Cannes at MIP Junior and MIPCOM. It's the trends that we've picked up on social media, and we have a great panel of experts here to discuss those trends right now. So thank you all for coming, guys. Introducing first Lisa Gray, who is a producer, and your company is called Black Meteor, and you're specialized in the more digital and next-gen stuff, aren't you, Lisa?
Yep. Yes, I do. I'm an EP, a development EP across platforms, working in VR, working in 360, and always up for the next new trend.
Great, and you've been doing a fantastic operation for us on Instagram this week. We'll come back to that.
Oh, thank you very much.
Robin.
Hello.
Hello. So you're an analyst. You work for Ovum,
That's
and
right.
you used to work for Sony and Disney before.
Correct, yes.
Okay, and your specialist subject is?
Well, I predict where things are heading, potentially heading. We're not sure.
That'll give us plenty to talk about,
Yes.
I'm sure. J.A. is a producer for her company is called Warrior Entertainment, and she's also one of our best MIPblog contributors. We'll get on to why, but how are you doing, J.A.?
I'm tired, and I think I still need more coffee.
Okay, we'll see what we can do about that afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And also introducing Josh from Little Airplane Productions. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you.
How was your show, either MIP Junior or MIPCOM? How did it go for you?
Well, we mostly do kid shows, so we do show both at MIP Junior and MIPCOM. It was a great week. I feel like it's a very upbeat, positive market. People are working. I feel like all the digital platforms have helped people a lot, so it's been a good week.
J.A., one personal highlight for you, apart from the coffee?
Having the women's lunch sponsored by A&E and getting to listen to Uzan Palsy speak about directing, that was hands down probably in the top 10 experiences of my life, not just at MIPCOM.
Wow. Okay, we'll get back to that later as well, that about the women lunch. Okay. Robin, one standout moment for you, or?
I would say it was Shonda. And when I worked at Disney, I was part of the, sort of development of some of those shows that are iconic and that have driven success all over the world. And so just seeing her, hearing her speak, listening to some of her really great quotes, which I wrote down, that for me was really made the market.
Okay, so that's Shonda Rhimes, our Personality of the Year. Did you have one lesson that you took away from her that is useful for everyone else, do you think?
I think she's talked a lot about taking risks, and I think that risk has, I think a lot of entertainment success is about taking big, bold risks. Okay. Even if, the data, the, market conditions, whatever, may tell you to do something else.
And not being afraid of failure then?
Exactly.
Okay, great. Lisa, one standout moment for you?
A standout moment for me was the keynote masterclass given by this Sony CEO, Kaz Hirai. For me, that was really exciting because it showed the potential of new technology and storytelling in a way that I really, really believe. And I think sometimes in our space, you can sit there and pitch and explain the potential, but it was so nice to see it actually really coming to life, this market. So that's why it was a highlight for me.
And it was said that Sony's in a rare position as a company that has both the content side and the technology side, so it'll be interesting to see what they come up with.
Absolutely. I think now we're seeing technology be a really strong potential platform, VR. I'm really looking forward to seeing content really progress on that platform as we really get to know that technology and its capabilities.
Great, we'll get back to that too. It's all planned in advance. the way that this panel works is I'm going to present some of the key topics that have come up, the biggest trending topics of MIPCOM and MIP Junior as seen on social media, and then I've also asked our panelists to come along with one other trend that really stood out for them, so that's what we're going to talk about. So these are the trends based on conversations on Twitter, and also the live blog reports that came up on that we were producing all week on MIP Trends, which is our new platform for industry content. This is the word cloud. It's a bit pixely on this massive screen, but it gives you a snapshot of what people were talking about. Obviously, there's rhymes for Shonda. There's Diverse for the Diversity Summit, which was another great new thing this MIPCOM. Hirschbiegel, who's the director of one of our world premiere screenings, The Same Sky. Boom, that's an interesting one. I'm not sure I can explain that, but you're welcome to try. Kiefer as well. Kiefer Sutherland was one of the most prominent stars here at MIPCOM. So that's in a nutshell what people are talking about. But what we did after this, we looked at the hashtags, and to see. So if you go through all the hashtags and what people have been tweeting and Instagramming about MIPCOM, this is the one that comes up first after MIPCOM, Meteor 2016. We don't count that, obviously, because we expect people to be using the MIPCOM hashtag. But interestingly, the one that came up at the top was, this means YouTube Red Originals. And this was something talked about by Susan Daniels from YouTube in her keynote, in which it was, she was very clearly saying how serious YouTube is about investing in content, just like Netflix does. She was talking about, one thing she was talking about was a series with The Rock, which has such a strange pitch that I had to write it down. It's an action series that has been commissioned about a life insurance company that sends its agents forward in time to prevent clients' accidental deaths. So that's the sort of thing that big names like The Rock are doing on YouTube right now. That'll be something to look forward to. The second biggest tweet, this was interesting, was Taken, so that's the series that has come from the film, and NBC Universal, who are behind the series. And these hashtags took off because Clive Standen, the actor, Instagrammed a cover of the MIPCOM news, which is where the series is advertised, and then that was picked up on Twitter and tweeted all over the place. So it's one of those random star things that just take off during a market. But I'm sure our friends at the MIPCOM News will be really happy that the magazine is a trending topic too. MIP Junior, that came up quite high in the hashtags. Now you'd expect MIPCOM to be at the top. It's always interesting to see what level of conversations is generated by MIP Junior. Josh, it was the biggest MIP Junior ever in terms of attendance. Did you feel it was particularly buzzy this year?
Yeah, MIP Junior was great. We focus on content for the younger kids, which is usually overlooked in our industry, but with the rise of the digital platforms, kids' content has really become like the gateway drug to get people hooked on Netflix, YouTube, Amazon. So there's this huge interest and a lot of investment in kids that just wasn't there 5 years ago. And I think we saw a lot of it at this market. So the kids' business is thriving in a way that it's never been in the 20 years that I've had a company.
Why do you think it's thriving that much right now?
Very simply, all of these platforms have realized they can only get so far acquiring old library content. They need something new. They need something that pops. So they're all looking for what that next show is. So everybody wants to suddenly invest in unique, creative unexpected original content so they can help brand their air as, oh, we're this kind of channel or we're that kind of channel. So suddenly it's kind of a feeding frenzy for new shows. So it's great for small independents like me. It's great for big distributors like DHX. It's anybody in the kids business right now who isn't working is probably just not showing up.
And I think when you go back to that YouTube Red example, like that kind of creativity is coming. It's a incredibly creative idea coming from these OTT platforms, and I'll second that notion. I work with a lot of independents, and there's a lot more doors opening at those Netflix and there's Amazons than it would be to get into the more heritage brands like the BBC or Discovery Channel. So it's kind of exciting and interesting, the kind of ideas like that rock one that's coming out.
So also with the new platforms, you see you can take more risks. I imagine that applies to kids' content as well.
Yeah, there's a lot more variety in animation styles, writing styles. It's been great for a lot of small international studios who normally might not get a commission for a full series because all these platforms are showing up at all the international markets. They're looking for great content and they're looking in unexpected places.
Fantastic. Okay, so that's a photo of MIP Junior. That was your. I wanted to put this photo up because Josh, one of your shows was on the show reel outside MIP Junior. That must have.
Yeah, it was very exciting. We actually were just delivering a show. It's called Peking Duckling that we do with a partner called Yu Yang in China, and we're delivering it to Disney. It's going to air next month. So we have only seen the animation within our studio, and when we arrived outside the Martinez, there it was on the big screen. And so my first thought was somebody hacked our server. And then I realized we actually was promoting it on purpose.
Great. Okay. Another big trending topic, another big hashtag was Unreal TV, which is the series that Constance Zimmer and Sherry Appleby were here to promote, and they were Constance and Sherry were super active on social media. This one is just I didn't get it animated, but she's going like this, and it's quite funny. But she was getting both of the actresses tweeting a lot about their MIPCOM experience. That was great to see. Women, big trend. More on our blog than on Twitter, because of this report which JA wrote and which got 10,000 shares, which is an absolute record for our blog. So a little round of applause for JA there, please.
Thank you.
You were saying it was amazing. It was an amazing moment for you, that lunch. Maybe could you tell us a bit more, Jay?
The thing with MIPCOM is it's always like a lot of buyers, producers, content creators, but to actually have a director the stature of Uzan Palsy to come in and talk about her experience as a woman director, because there are so few women directors. I was so moved by it. I think that's why I think I wrote a pretty inspired MIP blog, and that's why it connected with a lot of the fans, because it came from my heart, because I was so inspired, because A&E saw fit to, include a director for once instead of just a producer. Yeah. So it was a little bit different women's lunch than it had been in the previous years.
How do you see the cause, the subject of women in entertainment? How has it developed? Has there been significant progress made since, say, in the past 5 years since we've been having this lunch?
That's a hard question. We still have so few women directors, so few women showrunners. The women showrunners that we do have, they're still the Shonda Rhimes, the Gail Ann Hurds. Gail Ann Hurd came from feature films. I came from feature films. So we need to encourage women to direct the shows, be the showrunners, not just the writers or the producers, because you can have top-level executives, but they're not the absolute final say-so. So this last women's lunch, I was finally approached to say, hey, do you think you could be a showrunner? And I finally said yes.
That's fantastic news.
So we'll see what happens.
So I imagine you can't tell us much more about that.
No, I can't. So But thanks for asking.
I tried, but it's good news in itself. Okay, next, as another big post on the blog was an interview with Carl McLachlan. I don't know who on the panel is excited about the return of Twin Peaks next year.
I am.
So this was an interview with Carl McLachlan. This is also from the MIPCOM news. Unfortunately, he couldn't tell us much about what's going to happen, but I'm sure we'll find out more next year. What do you think special about this series, Robin?
I think it really broke the mold when it first aired in the United States on whatever channel it aired on, I can't remember. But I watched it with my mother, who after the second episode was so confused that she's like, I don't understand why this is getting so much hype. And I loved it because it was so different. And I stuck with it until the bitter end. And it kind of, lost its way in season 2, I think it was. But I love the log lady.
Yeah.
And I hope she makes a return.
Yeah, I hope so too. Okay, so we'll be keeping an eye out for that next year. Okay, so now we're getting on to each of the topics that I've asked our speakers to pick out. VR is the topic that Lisa chose, and it was one of the biggest hashtags of MIPCOM, with nearly 2% of all social conversations. So that's quite a good result in itself. What I wanted to talk about, Lisa, just to kick this topic off, is this photo. Of the panel where we had a speaker from HTC, and his name is Hervé Fontaine, and he said, when you have a flat screen, you can't really have emotion. We tweeted that quite a lot because we thought it would get lots of reactions. It didn't actually, but in conversations, it's definitely, when you talk to people about it, it's a bit of a surprising statement. What do you think of it, Lisa?
I agree. I mean, I come from, being one of these people that are absolutely out there promoting the potential of VR, but I think that's a big call to make at a MIPCOM. I think some of the most, some of the best things that have happened in television have been the evocative dramas that have come through that, people are binge viewing, and I definitely have been emotional from time to time watching that. So, yeah, I don't know if he was meaning to be controversial and trying to get attention on the topic, but I don't know if I agree with him. I think the great thing about this picture, it gets right to the core of some of the challenges with VR. Whilst it's a very important lean-in experience that are connecting audiences. Sorry guys, I've talked all week, so that's why I've kind of half lost my voice, so bear with me. It's that connects audiences or consumers to other places they've never been before, or issues that have usually been really hard to help, your audience grasp with. I think it's a very solitary experience. And I think, even things like the Rocky Horror Picture Show the other night, people rocked up dressed up and were singing along, and it was one of those reminders of the potential of entertainment. And I think sometimes some people go into this thinking that we're going to have the one platform that's going to rule them all. And I think for me, it's a reminder, and it was kind of nice to see Discovery Channel talking about their output of content, but also what they're doing in VR. Like, these are different touch points and how we're engaging audiences, and we're going to find different ways of telling stories that will suit this. But it's very much in its infancy. But even like the panel about how do we raise money for VR, they were talking about how, a year ago they were talking about the potential of technology. It's come so far, but even in the next month, with a lot more Daydream and a lot of other devices going mainstream, it's going to be really interesting to see where we're at with VR, by next year.
I think this picture illustrates that as well, that maybe it's the conversations about VR are still too led by technology and not enough about content. Would you
I was
agree
just
with
going
nodding in
to
agreement?
say, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, I saw that in movie theaters when they didn't air it on television, because that's what kids in the suburbs did in the United States. They dressed up. I personally didn't dress up, but other people dressed up, and they went to the midnight showing of the Rocky Horror Show, and it was social. And I think that, the social aspect of entertainment is really, really important, because people want to enjoy an experience together. And I think that, if I look at that picture, I think VR is amazing. But the idea that we're going to sit on our sofa like that every night is kind of ridiculous, in my opinion.
I mean, before I came on stage, I was looking again at some of the presentations that Facebook were making about VR, because obviously they've invested in it because it's expanding their social network. So it will have the social opportunity to connect with people that are far, far away. But, it is a very solitary experience that we have to remember. And to your point earlier about content, I was really heartened to hear that these creatives were encouraging technologists to invest in content, because we all know the potential with our imagination of this, but we need to show more examples and develop the culture of creating it as well as consuming it, so we understand its true potential.
Well, it's Oculus Rift is actually investing directly in content right now to encourage people to make more experimental stuff and just really go out there. And we had a good example of that with Notes on Blindness. We had a session that Angela moderated about this VR application where you experience going blind progressively over time, and you can see sounds, and that has, so we had the creators of that app and that experience, and it's doing really, really well. So there are ways for the right content to break through.
Absolutely, but yeah, and it's absolutely the ways for the right content. It's not going to be one platform to rule them all. And I think it's the more we understand its potential, the more we understand what kind of experience we'll have with it, like we do with films, like we do with television, and really stay true to those kind of ones rather than just thinking everything's going to work on VR.
Maybe it's also a case of maybe we need to, we were discussing before, stop talking about VR for it to become a big thing. There's the Pokemon Go was massive. It's been massive since last MIP. It's AR, it's augmented reality, but no one was saying it was AR. It was what do you think, Josh, of the potential of AR and VR applications for kids?
I think in the gaming area, there's tremendous potential. I'm a little bit skeptical when it comes to storytelling, and it's only because of the rise and fall of CD-ROM and the rise and fall of interactive storybooks. From a kid's creator point of view, what makes a plot work is that you can't influence the outcome. You're sort of a victim of the structure that the writer set out. So something happens, a problem, you get invested in the main character, and no matter how much you wish you could change things or look the other way, you can't. And that's what makes tension in a story, and that's what builds the plot and leads to a climax. So virtual reality, by definition, allows you to, in effect, change it up. You are now rewriting based on what you want to do, where you want to look with the VR, and I think that ultimately undermines a good story. It is possible that there will be whole new ways of writing and directing that will take this into account, but at least the limited content that I've seen that has been made for kids now, it really does follow, it's like an advanced CD-ROM. It gives you options, and options diminish the tension in a story.
But I think there's ways that you can use VR to help kid audiences connect with experiences that they haven't had the opportunity to experience. Like, travelling to the other side of the world and seeing an endangered animal right in front of them. And just, I think there's ways of using immersion for education, which really clever educational experiences can be entertaining, that I think are really important. But so I guess it's just depending. I think it's indicative of the infancy of where we're at with VR and what we're learning now.
There's also the thing, can you imagine kids wearing those helmets and get it for 3 hours and just...
Yeah.
I think kids wear helmets when they're skateboarding and doing everything else. So I, as a content creator, I think that the content creators need to step up, because a lot of people said, when television was in its infancy, it was going to kill, filmmaking. And we've gone through this progression of how we tell stories, and I think, like you said, Lisa, that we need to progress in the storytelling and come up with a new way of telling a story, because even in factual, it's not a 3-act structure anymore. It's constant, take a break, constant, take a break.
Well, there is more and more VR in news content, for example, at the moment, and that could seeg into documentary type content as well, I'd have thought. Okay, it's something we could go on about for ages, but there are other topics to be discussed. Robin, you want to talk about linear versus OTT? What was the best illustration of this debate at MIPCOM for you?
Well, I think OTT is interesting because I believe it was kind of an overriding theme of MIPTV, MIPCOM at some point in the recent past. And I think that nothing has really fundamentally changed about entertainment and about the business of entertainment. There is disruption. We know that, the audience is becoming more fragmented. We know that kids are really driving a lot of change, and they'll take some of those behaviors with them when they become adults, but they won't necessarily do stuff like Pokemon Go when they have responsibilities. And so I think that, when you look at change and you try and predict where things are heading, you kind of have to look at the little earthquakes as opposed to the big, gigantic, seismic, oh my God, everything is changing. And I think that Netflix, they are kind of like the 800-pound gorilla in the room, because they did change a lot of perception about what could be possible creatively. And I think that House of Cards was a huge risk. And they talk about the data, but House of Cards, when it originally aired on, I think, BBC Two in 1991, it didn't actually do that well. It was, I think, okay, but it was more about what was happening politically and capturing the zeitgeist, because I believe that's when Thatcher was losing her prime minister job.
Yeah, it was a very topical thing
Yeah.
in England back at the time, and it did get great reviews, but
It did.
not great ratings, I'm not sure, actually.
I can't remember. I've had this conversation with people at the BBC where they sort of said, well, we know what those ratings were because we had to go down in the vaults and get them. So...
And also, there are only 4 episodes, whereas
Yeah, that's
Netflix
right.
has made it into something much
Definitely.
bigger. So, where do you see things going with that now? There's not just Netflix, there's also Hulu, there's also Amazon, which is...
Exactly. There's a lot of competition. Everybody's jumping into this space. And I believe that Netflix as a brand is going to continue to be successful because they have really strong relationships within the creative community. I think they've been very smart. I think that Ted Sarandos and Reed Hastings are 2 of the most visionary leaders of an entertainment company. But they're also a tech company as well, and their user interface is world leading, and the user experience is pretty good compared to some of the competitors.
With the recommendations, etc.
Yeah, and they have their algorithms, and data's part of what drives that success, but it's also just the kind of relationship that people have with the characters and with the story. And I think you mentioned the emotional connection. We've had several conversations about this already, but I think it's just that emotional resonance that really is going to impact, why is the Twilight series so successful? Because a bunch of teenage girls, it's not that good, but a bunch of teenage girls bought those novels, and it meant something to them.
But does this mean, it's getting back to linear, are you saying that it's, the question that keeps coming up is it the end of linear scheduled TV?
I mean, get back to me in maybe 5 or 10 years' time, but I know for me, when I get home, when I'm done working, I just want to lean back and just watch whatever is on, some bad TV channel that is showing reality programming that I really enjoy, and I'm embarrassed to admit it. I like it as much as I do. And I think that, women, and diversity has, been a topic at MIPCOM. I think women are the ones who really decide what to watch. and they also decide what brands to buy. So they have always driven success in television. And as you say, there's not enough directors, there's not enough producers. There need to be more seats at the table for the ladies, I think.
Okay, but just trying to stay focused on the question of scheduled. Is it from your analysis and your experience, are people watching? If people are watching more and more Netflix, they must be watching less and less scheduled
TV,
right?
There's definitely change. I think the thing that I like about a schedule is that I am on a schedule and I have things I need to do. So when I am taking a few hours out to just relax and unwind, if there's a schedule and I know when to expect something, because I don't want to go around looking for something if I don't know what I want to watch. I think that, to the point of something like Netflix and their algorithms, they make it a lot easier to find something. They're investing in some of the most sort of zeitgeisty shows, like Stranger Things with Winona Ryder.
Yes.
And the kids, who I don't know who they are yet, but I will figure it out. And they will probably go on to be, to get film careers and so on. They're very much, a hot topic in Los Angeles. So I think that they have the right mix of the data, the risk, and the creativity, and the access to talent. I
think I've been personally enjoying the Amazon rollout on a weekly basis of new episodes. So I love a binge. But I think with a couple of their new programs, I actually find myself going, oh, no, the new episode's up. So I think that's also an interesting trend of how this OTT is evolving, but also bringing some of its linear habits back in to make sure you're not missing out.
Yeah. So it's on demand, but you can't binge it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's rolled out like a linear, but it's it's interesting.
You were saying, Josh, you were talking about all these new platforms that are not linear. Are you seeing more and more opportunity from that sort of platforms?
Definitely from a creator independent perspective, there's a lot more opportunity. I actually asked somebody at one of the big commercial networks the same question you asked, which was, how is this impacting your viewership? And what she said is, people always think that we're losing a big audience. They said that's not really our main concern about these platforms. Our big concern is that they're gobbling up all the talent. So it's really hard to find that head writer, that creative director, that show creator, because they're all getting their own projects now. So the real concern for that broadcaster was not so much ratings, it was really access to talent, because they pay well at the linear platforms and they're very aggressive. And as I said before, they're turning over every rock to find that next creator.
Okay, so they're more worried about talent than revenue, for example.
That one was.
Okay, any burning contribution to give to this topic, Jay?
I think that as a creator, the more opportunities you have for a creative outlet, then I can't, either or, whoever's paying. So I believe if you have the talent, the revenue will come. And as far as even like Amazon and Netflix, we were discussing producing a show for a linear station versus Netflix or Amazon. And they spend about the same on the shows, and they're still bound by the same union rules. So it was a very interesting production discussion from a revenue standpoint and talent standpoint. So for me, I think that linear, AUT, and VR should all partner together and make one big 3D, 360-degree universe and have complete immersion of the consumer in products and brands and everything.
Take note of that, and you'll kill it at MIPTV 2017, I think. So there's also a concern with all this technology, all this data, all these new platforms, which is that I think this was a concern you wanted to talk about, Jay. What if the metrics, the data, become more important than the creativity? Is this something you're really concerned about?
I think it's something that every single person in the audience is potentially concerned about, because you want the next Stranger Things, you want the next big thing. And yeah, you can feed your pipeline of shows with metrics driven. Okay, I need this demographic. I need this set of plot points in my story. We can produce that type of content, but it's not going to be revolutionary and groundbreaking. Netflix, like we said, they took chances. All of these different shows took chances, the creators took chances, and the distributors took chances. So it's this, do I want to make money and play it safe, or do I want to take risks and try something completely new? And in all of the panels that I've attended, which has primarily been the technology panel, I went to the 4K panel that was sponsored by Sony, and we were talking a lot about technology and creating, and it was a very standard cookie cutter. Okay, this is the metrics, this is the technology, this is what you're going to do as a director. And then I'd be like, no, I want to go over here and do this. And they're like, wait a minute, that's never been done before. So then it's like, how do you get the financing? So I've spent most of my time developing a different set of metrics for risk so that you would mitigate your risk in trying something different.
What metrics are they? Is that another secret?
So you want the secret? No, basically it's like investing. If you have X amount of talent and X amount of stars, will your stars drive your show, or will the concept? So with Stranger Things, I don't think their casting was necessarily, they didn't have The Rock in their show. Yeah. So it was a risk.
I think Winona Ryder helped though.
Yeah, but I don't know necessarily how much her pre-sale would be for the buyers. I mean, there's people in the audience that could probably answer that better from an international standpoint.
I think there's a big part of 80s nostalgia that drove that show, and I'm sure that must have come up in Netflix's data before they decided to invest. But I suppose another danger of this, the way they do things, they commissioned House of Cards based on data, but they also commissioned Marco Polo based on data, which didn't seem to do so well, didn't seem to resonate so much. So, Jay, just to be clear, you're calling for less reliance on data, but you're saying that there is a way to quantify risk.
Yeah, you just said that they basically had Stranger Things and Marco Polo didn't do so well. So if you know that this is the risk that you're going to take and you can afford to lose that money, then I believe that you're more willing to take that risk.
Okay, so it's basically before you decide to do something, you just have to establish if you can afford the risk,
yes,
afford the potential loss.
Yes.
But that's difficult to work out, isn't it? How much you're going to lose?
Well, if you can't make your money back, then you've lost.
Yeah.
So it goes back to the old way of financing feature films, where they would have completion bond guarantees, and they would have a set of metrics based on their stars. But if you are using a complete unknown, how much does it take you to get a market share in a particular territory?
I think just a word on House of Cards. I mean, it had Kevin Spacey. It had David Fincher on the pilot episode. The talent to deliver a really awesome pilot, which was screened, I think, 2 years ago, whenever it was, whatever year it was. I mean, it was a well-written, well-produced, brilliantly acted show. And that's why it was successful. And Kevin Spacey obviously attracted the investment, and somebody decided to take a risk on it, and that was Netflix.
But there are loads of really well-written shows that go unnoticed.
True.
I suppose what I'm trying to get to, and this is I hope it's a good question for an analyst, is has the industry maybe become too reliant on data from your point of view?
I think a good creative will look at the data and will go with gut instinct, because the idea that the data is always going to tell you what you've always watched, and here's another show, sometimes you don't know what you want until you see it. And I think that's a very basic principle of marketing, programming, whatever. And I think it's that kind of water cooler conversation of what everyone at the office is talking about, what your friends are talking about online. It's word of mouth. And a lot of word of mouth takes place offline.
Yeah. it's what one of the reserves that the French TV watchdog said when Netflix arrived in France is we don't necessarily approve of this recommendation system because we think it cuts out all potential for random discovery
Exactly.
of stuff. Mm.
And I think that I don't, maybe I can't remember the subscriber numbers at this point, but I know that Netflix has struggled a little bit in France because France have been doing, OTT for a little bit longer than most other countries. They kind of led the way.
Where do you stand on this this topic, Josh? Do you think we've become too reliant on data and audience metrics as an industry, or is it helpful for what you do as a producer?
I agree with the statement that it really comes down to the gut of the creator, the gut of the commissioner, and the gut of the audience. And so certainly it helps to look at numbers. Everybody looks at the numbers, but they're never going to tell you how to make a new show. They're certainly not going to tell you how to craft a hit. So, it helps you a little, in my view.
Lisa?
I think it's also a matter of making sure you get the right collaborators together, and I think timing's very, very important. I love data, but I think sometimes you can get the mathematical equation right, but maybe the combination of what you've put together to take that data into a show, you might get wrong. And I think there's been a couple of examples of that you might have the right lead actor who resonates with that audience and the right director and the right, and the right story apparently, but the combination that's put together to make that just hasn't worked.
Like Waterworld, maybe.
Yes. So I think there's a lot of factors. I think data is very helpful. I think understanding your audience and always connecting to them is really, really helpful, especially you come to a market like this and, we are all entertainment experts and sometimes we forget there's a whole audience and world out there that that all see, the same brand or the same idea coming at them regardless of what platform it's on. And so I think it's always better to I love being able to connect and have that access to audience, but getting the right team or right band together to make that product I think is very, very important.
Yeah, so it comes back to talent again, not just
absolutely
behind the camera and in front of it.
So it's like metrics and creativity rather versus.
Yeah, absolutely. They don't need to be against each other. JA, you have a huge fan base on social media. Those are really interesting metrics for you to have. See how they react to whatever you publish.
Different things that I say and different things that I do. Yeah. I come from a film background. I've done 4 feature films. One of them, fortunately or unfortunately, got pirated, primarily in Asia and Africa. So I would get random, hey, I really like your movie. So what we did was we marketed to the themes that were present in the film, and my fans love it. It resonated with them, and I got more fans.
So you marketed to the theme. Could you explain that? You marketed to the themes that were in your film?
In the films, yeah. Which is as a female director in non-traditional countries such as Japan, Asia, South Korea, China. It's interesting to go in with a strong female-driven content story and then have fans resonate and become, as you see, engaged to the empowerment of women, because people are like, oh no, women-driven shows won't sell, and historically they haven't, but I've kind of slid in under the radar because my films got pirated. And Lisa and I had the discussion earlier on whether piracy necessarily in and of itself was bad, or if it becomes another market metric of this underground of what the audience really wants to see, because while we may be the experts here, I think our audience is the expert out there. And sometimes we don't always hear what they have to say, except through these odd means of their pirating our stuff. So why not make it and sell it to them?
Can you give an example of how fan input has changed, has influenced the way you make content or the topics that you develop?
For example, on the, it may just be Facebook's metrics, but for the 10,000 likes that I got on Facebook and shares, I had 3 or 4 different posts that didn't do well. I know certain times when my fans are online because of the certain countries that they're in. And what had happened was I put certain keywords that resonate with my fans, particularly on my page, and it didn't take. And then so I tried another one, and it didn't take. And then I was like, okay, I'm just going to go with the old standby. And as you can see, they reacted very well to the interaction.
So it's a case of trial and error, again, risk-taking.
Yes. And what necessarily works for my fan page won't work for my new show. So it's this very odd, the audience is fickle and they'll flip the channel at the bottom of the commercial hour and go watch something else, but you want to keep them engaged. So that's the trick.
But I mean, if all your fans said to you, J.A., make a zombie film, would you do it?
I don't think my fans would tell me to make a zombie film.
I
did make a zombie film. It didn't do very well. My friends were like, J.A., we need you to go back and do action movies and hang out of helicopters and, ride your motorcycle screaming down the freeway at 150 miles an hour. And I'm like, okay, I can do that.
We've got a helicopter waiting outside the session, so you can do that.
Let's go grab some 4K Sonys and we'll go film. We'll go shoot a show right now.
We're also planning to talk about Asia. You have some experience there, which could lead into Josh's topic.
Yes. When I graduated film school from the University of Southern California, I actually went to work for Sho Kosugi, who did all the ninja films. And as a woman in 1992, it was very difficult for me to write English dialogue for a Japanese gentleman. So I couldn't use my real name of Jacqueline Andrea. It had to become J.A. So I was able to successfully write English dialogue for Sho Kosugi for NHK and Tohotawa and a lot of the wonderful Japanese companies that Japan has had over the years that I've been very excited to work with. And I think, Josh, you've worked with some companies in Asia as well, in China.
Yeah,
I've worked with...
We wanted to get onto... We'll get onto China, but just to stay on Japan because it was our country of honor. We were saying that Japan has come a long way since that story you were telling, and now it was really here as a content powerhouse and one that's really looking to interact with the Western world.
Yes,
yeah.
They've very much done that.
How do you see them? Firstly, Josh, the Japan as a do you take Japan seriously as a content powerhouse today?
I do, mostly because the originality in Japan is just so incredible. The imagination of at least on the children's side, what they make is unlike anything. I usually attend Pre-Jeunesse in Germany, where they feature a lot of NHK programming, and it's always the most beautiful, most well-designed, most interesting content. So I'm a big fan of the whole Japanese aesthetic. We did one project about a year ago with NHK to reboot Domo, which was traditionally a stop-motion character. It has a very big fan base among college kids in the US, so we collaborated with NHK and Big Tent, who's the licensing partner, on a special that was basically designed to update Domo's look. And we had to work very closely with an excellent Japanese studio that created the character called Dwarf. And so I'm a big fan of all things Japanese. I find that the Japanese have very little in common with, say, the Koreans or the Chinese. So the grouping of these countries is, it's geographic, but it's certainly not cultural. And when it comes to content, they each have a very distinct point of view from our experience.
Okay, but the big differences between Japan and China. China's the country you're more familiar with. What are the big differences there for someone who's new to both?
Well, you know, Korea obviously has a very distinct aesthetic as well. They're great at these super cute characters that seem to they seem to cut across all demographics. So you have adults with these keychains that have these little cute characters. China, what I find is that they are really struggling to figure out what their voice is. And we have a colleague in Beijing, and I asked him this question, and he said, because of the Cultural Revolution, there is a big gap in our history where the momentum that we had creatively was, in effect, stopped for a period of time. And now it is, you have a lot of really creative companies who are really looking to figure out how do we want to present ourselves to each other and to the world. So you have a lot of interesting individual studios, but you don't really have a national identity, particularly in the animation area. So one of the things that we've been doing as a company, rather than trying to sell our content into China, which is very difficult, typically impossible, even for Netflix, who just gave up on China, what we try to do is we go in and we say, what are your goals globally? And then we help them shape their ideas, which are often very unique, very good, but we help massage the content, the storytelling, the show Bible, and then we come on as co-production partners for the actual production, and we help them do their sales around the world. So two examples of this is a show called Super Wings that's very big all over the world. It's on Sprout in the US. It's owned by a toy company called Alpha in Guangzhou. So we worked with them and their Korean partner Funny Flux to help develop that idea, bring it to the market, and now we handle pre-production in New York. Everything else is done out of Korea and China. The second show is called Peking Duckling, which is going to launch, as I mentioned, next month on Disney US. And again, it was a collaboration between us and our Chinese partners. We looked at their goals, some of their thoughts about comedy, things that were working in China. So together, we, in effect, mixed our DNA to create something that was still very Chinese, but also had the sensibility of the international market. And for kids animation, at least, you really do need to think globally, because it's so expensive to produce animation. You know, a low budget for one season is around $9 million. So you really have to be looking at the whole world in terms of making this content.
Okay, so Western companies, Western TV or makers or companies shouldn't just think, oh, we can go in there and sell our content, and like in any other territory, it needs to be taken. You need to have a very specific approach.
Yes, exactly. I mean, any show that has no Chinese owner, no Chinese content, is not going to be approved by SARF, which is the government agency that approves content. And if it's a kids show, you're going to be relegated, if you're lucky, to a very small block on CCTV, the public broadcaster. So everybody wants to get exposure for their brand in China. Very, very few do. 1 or 2 a year at the most. And usually it's because of some prior relationship, you know, that the company has, or because of some new government initiative, like the UK and China announced a pact recently that led to the Octonauts, which is a quote-unquote foreign property being approved by SARF. So they're now working on a production of the Octonauts for China. So there are occasionally these rare exceptions, but if you're the typical company, you're just not going to get your stuff sold in China, particularly on the linear channels. You may get them on an SVOD service, but the government's also looking very closely at content on SVOD services in China, and everybody feels they're going to be cracking down on those as well.
So that you, just thinking of the great blog post you did for us about all these tips, it seems to me that things have to be very much done in general from a joint venture sort of perspective, often.
Yeah, there are really 3 things I would say about China. One is, rather than looking at how China can help your company, look at how your company can help the Chinese with their goals creatively, commercially, and they're much more likely to embrace you and your company if you approach it that way. The other is that a lot of people will make 1 or 2 trips over to Beijing or Shanghai. They'll go to a festival, and they have, you know, they see it like a big piggy bank that they want to loot, and they try to get something signed very quickly. This never works in China. They're extremely cautious about outside countries coming in, and with good reason. They see what places like Netflix have done to places like the Nordics, where it's really challenged their entire broadcast environment. They can't compete with the budgets of Netflix. So they're very protective of their market, and I don't really blame them for being that way. So any deal that they do with the West is going to be the result of a very long courtship. It's going to be a deeper, longer relationship. So a lot of people go in thinking they can make some easy money in China. There's no easy money to be made in China. And the third thing that we always say, and I learned this from Sharon Gomez, who's sitting right there. She's our vice president at Little Airplane, and she encouraged me for years to go to China, and I was always very reluctant. I was kind of nervous, but we finally went over, and we went again and again, and what I learned from Sharon is that you really have to spend time with the Chinese. They like to do things face to face. They like to see how you are at dinner. They like to get to know you. They want to hear about your family. It's not a transactional arrangement the way it is here at MIP. Things don't happen because you had a good pitch at the VIP lounge. They happen because trust was built up over time. And I think that's been the key to our success, is that now I love to go to China. Sharon loves to be in Asia. She's from Singapore. So it's all worked out quite well simply because we enjoy being there. That's helped our business in China.
Okay, so the timing sounds right then for... We announced we're going to have a new MIP in China next May. I'm sure there's plenty of potential to be explored in territories like China, as long as you go at it from a collaborative stance and not trying to impose yourself. Robin, you seem to be...
Well, I would just say that having spent some time in Hong Kong, and I felt like it is a place you have to go to really appreciate and travel a little bit, because it is very different than the West, and there are different cultural considerations that need to be considered, and there's also this very rich history of storytelling. And when I was in Hong Kong, I watched Chinese language programming. I can say maybe 2 words in Chinese, and you didn't need to know what was really going on because it was so visual. And I think, I remember some time ago, my brother always used to watch all the Kung Fu movies. So I think that, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of imagery. So they have a very good history of creating content that should be respected.
Okay. I did want to leave time for questions at the end, if anyone has a question for the panel? Don't be shy. No? Okay. You're good to go, Jay.
Am I good?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I was going to say, after having spent some time in Japan, this is an interesting discussion to listen to, because I think I'm excited that Japan was the country of honor this year, because having watched a lot of television from Japan, I love Japanese television, as well as the one thing that we didn't mention is the Japanese anime. So that is huge. And I mean, the world follows, Japanese anime, at least in the genres that I work in. So I feel that I'm excited for the competition, because I think that the competition will increase the creativity in both animation and live action.
We had there was a panel about what's next for Japan animation, because there's a concern that now Miyazaki is no longer driving things. Who's next? But it seems that there are new talents coming up and filling that space.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to mention it, because everybody's like, oh no, I'm like, no, they're gonna, it's gonna be. I'm excited. So I'm sad, but I'm excited, because it's a new opportunity for a lot of creators that may have otherwise been overshadowed.
Okay. So we do have a couple of minutes left. I just did want to talk about one last thing that I mentioned at the beginning. It was the elevator pitch. It wasn't it wasn't in the top 10 trending topics, but it was a really great new thing that we did at MIPCOM, and the idea was brought to me by Lisa here and Sandra there, And if you missed it, the principle was we invited people to come to a hotel on Tuesday morning, and they could pitch their program to our Instagram account, but they had 15 seconds to do it. That's the principle of an elevator pitch that's done a lot in startup world, for example. And then we showed those the pitches that we got to a buyer, who's Mike Timmerman from Red Arrow, and the winner was here, Lital Shemesh. I think she's gone home now, but she came up with a great idea where you could change your mind before you get married, which seems to resonate with Mike. The point of the operation wasn't to sell the format, but it was rather to give the winner this time with a buyer, just from having posted something on Instagram. And we're hopeful that sort of thing, getting producers' pitches out there in public on the internet, rather than doing them behind closed doors, hopefully can allow buyers to find new ideas. I think that was the thing we were hoping for, wasn't it, Lisa?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been lucky enough to have a couple of TV shows commissioned, and a big part of that has been the practice of pitching and learning how to pitch your idea in a one-liner. And so we took it to the next level by doing it in an elevator and got all the cliches involved. But I think the practice of being able to say it in one line, and also being able to talk to a commissioner and have that experience, has been really valuable for me. And I'm sure, the more up-and-coming producers or people who are coming to the market first time have that practice, the better.
Okay, so I just wanted to say thank you to you, Lisa and Sandra. Could you come up here, please? We've just got a little souvenir of France for you to say thank you, and give them a round of applause, please. Okay, thanks, Sandra. Thanks very much, everyone, for coming to this panel. Thank you, all of our speakers. It's been great, really interesting. We hope to see you again at MIPTV next April. And meanwhile, you can follow everything that we've covered online on miptrends.com, on our YouTube channel, on Instagram, on Twitter. We're all over the place. So everything that's important that's happened at MIPCOM and MIP Junior these past few days, you can find it online. So that's it. Thank you very much for coming.